So thank you all very much. Thank you for the invitation. I've got a really long presentation that I'm going to go through very slowly. No, actually, it's a long presentation. I'm going to focus on a few slides that actually give an overview of some of the things that I personally and we at YSUM think are important when you look at networks for critical infrastructure. And I will try not to go too long. So for those of you that don't know YSUM, hopefully most of you do by now, we are an industry alliance. We're looking at particularly outdoor global mesh networks. We've developed a specification based on open standards that's about delivering interoperability, particularly for industries such as AMI, smart cities. So we now have 200 member companies across 25 countries. So the specification that we're particularly looking at for outdoor networks is called the YSUM FAN, and the use cases include things like AMI, which is where we came from, and then things like EV charging infrastructure, distribution automation. Where possible, then you could use that same network for interconnection of things like SCADA as well. And then more recently, in smart cities, things like street lighting networks, and then incorporating things like traffic management, parking. And then we even have some applications in structural health monitoring and agriculture. So really, application-independent communications technology. So I want to briefly talk about some of the things that matter in our view on security. So some of the concerns, fake identity. So when you're looking at IoT devices, is that device that's trying to join the network really who it says it is? Things like loss of confidentiality, which is the unauthorized disclosure of information. So if you've got metering data, you want to encrypt it because you don't want other people looking at it. The loss of integrity. This is where maybe there's unauthorized modification or destruction of information. So if somebody's getting metered and they're supposed to pay 1,000 rupees for their power and they manage to modify the message and it's only 500, then that's great for them, but not for the utilities. And then the loss of availability. You see, network disruption can be extremely problematic, particularly when you're relying on the network for certain functionality and information. Some of the challenges, IoT devices, and that includes things like smart meters, they're often constrained, they have limited resources. If you're looking at gas and water metering or some battery-operated sensors, they don't have a lot of energy. They probably have a limited user interface, and they're easily physically accessible. So it's pretty easy for somebody to go to a meter that's mounted on the outside of a building and tamper with it and put new code in it. Also with wireless, which is really important for this environment, then it's easily overheard and it's easily interfered with. So some of the attack models, and I'll go more briefly, things like message injection, where somebody injects a bogus control information into the network, eavesdropping, so somebody can capture network traffic and then use it later to analyze. So one of the things you can do with that is, if you get enough data from the same connection, then you can work out what the keys are and then decrypt it. And then things like traffic analysis. So the problem is if you're monitoring, say you're monitoring electricity usage, then you can possibly work out whether a premises is unoccupied or not. So modification of messages, where you can change it on the fly. Node capture, where you can compromise a particular device on the network and use it for an attack on the network. And there have been a number of high-profile cases where in IoT where people have said, oh, that's not an important device, it doesn't need to be secured. And then that's been used as, so baby monitors. There was even some environmental monitoring in a fish tank in Las Vegas, where the attackers managed to get into the casino's financial system. And then there's what we all know about denial of service attacks. They can happen either through something like an internet-mounted attack, which is what happened with Ukraine, or it could happen through service disablement. So within YSUM, we believe that the first step is identity, which is critical security. So YSUM, because most of this is critical infrastructure like smart meters, DA equipment, then all the YSUM products will have a certificate-based security to protect the identity of the device and to provide a way of doing secure key exchange with a AAA server. So mutual authentication, we believe, is really important. And I assume, gentlemen, that we can discuss some of this later when we come on to discussion. So I won't go through all the details. I'll make this presentation available later. So we're using PKI. It's tried and true standard or suite of standards that's been used for decades to protect the internet that ensures authentication of devices, encryption, data integrity, and additionally authorization. So just because a device is permitted to join a network doesn't mean it's able to or should be able to access all the resources that are on that network. So in the same way with you as an individual, you may allow somebody to read some of your emails, but you certainly don't allow them to send them. So massively scalable, interoperable, long-time standards-based, and it's greatly superior to some of the other techniques that are available. Very briefly, because I've got 12 seconds, network topologies. So a number of networks are using a star topology. This is typically where devices talk directly to a tower. In some cases, like with LoRa, they talk to multiple towers, which lets you do position awareness, location awareness. There's pros and cons. I would say there's lots of cons, but not just now. YSUM FAN uses mesh network topology. In this, devices can talk directly to each other. They also talk, so YSUM FAN doesn't stand in isolation. It has a connection onto the backbone network through either fiber or LTE or other things, Ethernet maybe. But the key thing is that the radio technology is symmetric and devices can intercommunicate and can route around any problems. And then you can connect leaf nodes onto the network, which are battery-powered devices. They would just find their nearest point on the mesh. One other thing briefly, gateway or router. So a couple of distinctions here. The ingress point where the IoT devices then connect onto something like a backhaul. A gateway device would connect dissimilar technologies. A router is connecting similar technologies. So with YSUM FAN, we use IP, IPv6 all the way to the end node, so that's a routing technology. Picture of our security architecture, some conclusions. Use best security practices at all points in the network. Use IP at the earliest opportunity. Tried and tested standards-based security. And deploy intrusion detection wherever possible. That's it. Finished. Thank you very much. Sorry I overran.